My parents skipped my birthday party to sail the Caribbean with my sister. I told them, enjoy the view. They didn't know I had a $3 beach house. I hosted a birthday lavish bash with all our relatives. When the videos went viral without them, the apologies flooded in. Hi, my name is Maya Bennett, 30 years old, living in Austin, Texas, and this morning, as the first sunlight slipped through the curtains in my living room, I received a short message from my mother. Honey, we can't do a birthday party this year. Your father and I are heading to the Caribbean with Savannah. You understand. Enjoy. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before typing back, enjoy the view, then placed the phone face down and felt a faint crack echo inside my chest, like the familiar empty chair being pulled out once again on a day that was supposed to be mine. No follow-up call, no promise to make it up, only the smell of fresh coffee and one thought settling in clearly, if the seat at their table was never meant for me, why am I still waiting? I will set my own table, with the exact number of chairs I choose, and invite those who truly want to show up. No anger, no pleading, just a firm decision. My 30th birthday will not be reduced to a passing status update. If you've ever faced an empty chair on your birthday, at graduation, or during a family dinner, what would you do? Keep waiting for someone to remember you? Or light your own candles and invite those worthy to sit down? Tell me your choice and where you're listening from. I set my cup of coffee down, watched the thin mist fade across the wooden table, rested my hand on the surface, and remembered every birthday that came before. When I was 8, my family held a party in the backyard of our house in Plano, Dallas. A folding table draped with red paper cloth, paper plates printed with "Happy Birthday," and a sheet cake from Costco with my name written in purple frosting. When it was time to blow out the candles, the patio door opened to let in a group of Savannah's friends, the breeze snuffing out half the flames. My mother quickly laughed it off, saying, light them again, before turning to me with a reminder to wait until everyone's here. I watched as my chair was shoved to the edge of the table to make room for one of her friends, while the chair beside mine remained empty, a polite, neatly placed empty chair, as if it belonged to anyone except the person whose day it was supposed to be. At 10, my cake was placed beside a large poster celebrating Savannah's 10 Kelvins followers. The adults were buzzing with excitement about the beauty brand that had sent her gifts, while I clutched the doll a classmate had given me, standing by until the lighting was good enough for pictures. I remember vividly the smell of candle wax dripping onto the cake, and that strange moment when the knife meant to be placed in my hands was instead given by my mother to Savannah. Cut it for your sister, your hands are steadier, the photo will look nicer. The knife moved from my mother's hand to hers, passing right in front of me like a small, simple, unintentional ritual. Yet it carved a very fine line inside me, the line between the one who is seen and the one who only stands there to complete the frame. When I was 12, I learned what it meant to wait until it's someone else's turn. That Saturday, Dallas was sweltering, but the living room air conditioner blasted icy cold. My favorite marble cake sat on the coffee table, candles already placed, white frosting spelling out, "Happy 12th, Maya," in a neat circle. I had put on a navy blue polka dot dress, tied my hair back neatly, ready to make a serious wish. But at exactly 6:40 p.m., my mother glanced at the clock and winked at Savannah. "Sweetheart, your live starts at 7, right? Let's push Maya's cake back 30 minutes so we don't miss your live stream." Savannah lit up, dragging out her tripod, setting up a small ring light, and opening her laptop to log into Justin.TV, the channel she proudly bragged was getting more views. My father picked up the camcorder to test the sound, and my mother cleared away paper cups so the background would look tidier on camera. I sat quietly in my chair, watching each candle begin to bend under the chill of the air conditioning and the weight of passing time. When the old spring clock in the kitchen struck 7 with its hurried chimes, the whole room clapped for Savannah as she went live. My father's finger slid up the camcorder lens, my mother hovered just outside the frame, ready to hand her lip gloss, and I, the supposed star of the day, was told, "Just wait a little while, we'll cut the cake right after the stream." On the laptop screen, the viewer count jumped to 500, then 800, then 1,000. Oh my God, 1,000. My mother and father's voices blended with Savannah's as she read the comments, the ring light shining blindingly against her face. And in the middle of it all, a stray breeze slipped through the door crack, and the 5 remaining candles on my cake went out in an instant. No one noticed. I cupped my hands around the candles, ready to ask for matches, but my mother signaled for silence. We're live. A few minutes later, someone sent Savannah a mini cake shaped like her channel logo. Once again, the knife passed from my mother's hand to hers so she could unbox on stream, while my cake slowly slid to the edge of the table. When the live stream ended, the room was full of good job and laughter. My father held the camera, my mother wrapped her arms around Savannah, and I carefully pushed the empty chair back toward the table, relit the spent candles by myself. They burned unevenly, their wax pooling into a hollow like an hourglass, marking that my time had already drained away into something else. That night, I wasn't angry at Savannah. She only did what the whole family expected of her. I didn't cry either. I opened the garage door, switched on the dim yellow bulb, spread old test papers across the workbench, and rummaged through my father's toolbox for a small screwdriver. I took apart a broken radio piece by piece. In the clicking of the soldering iron and the sharp, burnt plastic smell of old components, I learned a lesson no one had ever taught me. If your voice doesn't carry into the living room, then find a way to make what you build produce a different sound, even if it's faint, as long as it lasts. I found a quiet peace in the steady rhythm of small tasks, sorting screws into old HEB jars, labeling them with a marker, sketching wire diagrams, drawing neat charts to track, disassembled divided by assembled divided by repaired, with a school ruler. The summer I turned 14, Aunt Carol started selling handmade scented candles. I volunteered to help with her order spreadsheets, adding a column for fragrance notes, creating invoice codes with formulas copied from forums. When she smiled and said, "This one has a head for logistics," I realized I had already built a long bridge from the garage to the future. A bridge of silent work, of straight, tidy spreadsheets, of joy that needed no fireworks. In the years that followed, every birthday carried a small, quiet milestone of its own. At 16, I set my alarm early, inflated balloons, and hung lights before anyone woke up, making the living room festive without waiting for permission. At 18, I brought my cake to the school's charity book fair and shared it with volunteers while my family was away filming Savannah's travel lookbook. At 21, I reserved a table at a Tex-Mex place near campus, paid with my part-time library job, and practiced saying, "It's okay," in a voice that no longer tasted bitter. Each time I blew out candles, I didn't wish to be seen. I wished to build something useful, something that would free me from ever having to stand before an empty chair again. I began to learn how to break big tasks into smaller steps, like slicing a cake into enough pieces, making checklists, timing each stage, weighing risks, drafting contingency plans. I learned how to hold my tongue when necessary, not to endure silently, but to channel my energy into the right places. Into tasks I could control, into systems that would keep running even if no one applauded. When I entered college at UT Austin, I chose supply chain management because spreadsheets and to-do lists gave me room to breathe. I spent whole days in the PCL library, drawing lines, tagging items, sketching arrows of product flow across paper as if I were setting a table no one could mess up. By sophomore year, I had secured an internship at a small 3PL company handling fulfillment for Shopify brands around Austin. The warehouse was hot, and the smell of cardboard clung to my hair, but I loved its steady rhythm. Trucks arriving at 7:10, pallets hitting the floor, scanners chirping their short, sharp beep, orders moving off the shelves in strict order of priority. I learned to spot a bottleneck the way someone notices an empty chair at a crowded table. If no one pays attention, the entire gathering stalls. By the time I graduated, I didn't dream of a flashy title. What I wanted was something small, precise, and durable, a product that would help shop owners find their way through the chaos of inventory, just as I once had to find my way through the chaos of my own birthdays. The first version I built was a demand forecasting tool for Etsy and Shopify stores selling handmade goods. I thought smart meant predicting the future well, but reality hit me hard. Shop owners didn't care about pretty charts, they just wanted to avoid running out of stock on Fridays and not mix up two identical orders. 3 months, 20 demos, only one paying customer who canceled after 2 weeks, calling it too fussy. I looked at my roadmap, bit my lip, and deleted half of it. My first pivot: drop forecasting, go back to basics inventory management. I rewrote the flow. Connect to Shopify through a webhook, subtract stock with every new order, and if a SKU hit its reorder point, the system would fire off an SMS alert. A candle shop in Waco, Bluebonnet Candle Company, complained, "We always run out of Hill Country lavender by the weekend." I drove my old Civic to Waco, sat among shelves scented with lavender and cedarwood, pulled out a pencil and notebook, and sketched a layout. B2 was their best seller. It needed to move closer to the packing table. Labels should be color-coded by turnover speed. Pick lists should print by aisle order, not order number. I opened my laptop, quickly tweaked the pick-pack algorithm, and added a consolidate button to group multiple orders from the same customer. A week later, they messaged, "It's way less chaotic, and we're not running out of stock on Sundays anymore." That became my first paying contract, $299 a month. I signed it quietly, no photos, just went home and updated my banquet table list, one seat, finally filled. From Waco, I built a chain of occupied seats by getting the small things right, integrating barcode scanning with phones, adding automated label printing, generating a 5 SKUs nearing empty report. I stopped chasing sparkle and leaned into persistence. 10 cold emails a day, 2 weekend drives each week to San Marcos, Round Rock, San Antonio for on-site installs. 6 months in, I had 18 paying customers, enough cash flow to support myself and a part-time developer. Then one day, a small fund in Austin, a family office doubling as a seed investor, knocked on my door. They said, "We don't want to replace you, we just want you to move faster." I wrestled with the decision for 2 nights. In the end, I sold 40% of the company. Some of the money went straight back into hiring and reserves, a smaller portion came to me as secondary. For the first time in my life, I paid off my student loans, fixed the air conditioner that had been rattling every midnight, and put down a deposit on a dream I had carried since the garage. A safe place of my own making. I didn't want Miami, didn't want a place that screamed, "Look at me." I wanted the salt of the sea breeze, the wild dunes, a quiet road long enough to hear my own breath. Outer Banks, Nags, Head came to me during a road trip the year before. Endless stretches of sand, wooden houses raised on stilts, porches howling with wind when distant storms rolled in. 3 million sounded extravagant to outsiders, but here, oceanfront meant exactly that. You were buying wind, sky, and a promise that hurricane season would test everything you built. I did the math not to flaunt it, but to make sure I wasn't leaping blind. No outright purchase, I took a fixed rate 30-year mortgage, putting down nearly 30%. I added to the spreadsheet coastal insurance costs higher than inland, an extra windstorm policy, a basic NFIP flood contract, local property taxes, upkeep for wooden decks, repainting railings after every salt season. A budget for beach nourishment if the city called for it, and if I rented it occasionally, I accepted local lodging taxes and B&B permit fees. I hired a small management company in OBX, and they reminded me about septic inspections, guest limits, quiet hours after 10, and most importantly, no neon signs. They laughed. "This place belongs to warm lights only." I signed without trembling. Not because I was wealthier than anyone else, but because for the first time I chose a place where my logistics-driven mind no longer had to fight. It could arrange, prepare, switch on a light, and no peace would follow. The house wasn't a trophy, it was a new table I had set for myself, facing the Atlantic. A high-ceilinged living room, sliding glass doors opening onto a wooden deck, a long table in the center with enough space for 3 generations to sit together. A kitchen with a quartz island, not to boast of luxury, but to hold trays of baked goods and gather people passing plates like passing words. I set aside a small room as a tool room, a pump, bins of supplies, a hurricane season checklist, spare batteries, flashlights. Everything labeled, lined up neatly like in the old garage, but this time it was guarding a world that finally belonged to me. I kept this from my family, not because I enjoyed secrets, but because I knew the story would be rewritten if I let them hold the pen. If my mother knew, she would say, "You bought it because you're copying Savannah's travels, right?" And the house would become another backdrop for her photos, while I was pushed back to the edge of the table. If my father knew, he would help calculate whether it was better to rent it out or save it for our family weekends, until eventually there would be no free days left for me. If Savannah knew, she would bring her camera before I could, and once again the knife meant for me would pass through someone else's hands. I wanted to preserve this place exactly as it was, a space where I didn't have to explain why I deserved a seat in the center. I told only a few relatives without conflict: Aunt Carol, Uncle Jacob, because they would understand. For the rest, I let the house remain on the deed and in my heart as a quiet period at the end of all the missed birthdays. From now on, if their table still had no seat for me, I would open my own doors and add more chairs. I pulled my laptop closer, opened my contacts, and stared at the names of people I hadn't spoken to in years except on holidays. Aunt Carol, Uncle Jacob, Grandma Ruth in Tampa. Suddenly, I felt the need for confirmation beyond myself to know that being overlooked wasn't just a feeling but a pattern quietly running through our family. I called Aunt Carol first. The phone rang twice before her voice came through, raspy but warm. "Maya? You called just as I was steeping a pot of mint tea." I smiled and asked directly, "Auntie, did Mom or Dad say anything about my birthday, or invite you on the cruise with Savannah?" There was a pause, the sound of a spoon against a teapot, then she said softly, "No, sweetheart. I heard them say this year it's just immediate family, but I thought at least you would have your own birthday dinner." She sighed, and then added something that sounded as though it had been sitting in her heart for a long time. "Ever since Savannah got famous, with your mother, everything seems to revolve around her schedule. I don't blame her, I just regret that so many tables in this family suddenly lost chairs for someone else." I leaned back in my chair, my chest lighter for having someone say what I had always thought. Aunt Carol went on, her voice slow, pulling at each thread. "Last year at Thanksgiving, she received a message saying, 'Stay warm at home, because the house is crowded,' only for photos later to show a table packed with guests. On my 28th birthday, she sent a gift card, and my mother replied, 'I'll give it to Savannah to hold on to,' but that card never reached me." She hesitated. "I worry saying this will hurt you, but if you called to know the truth, then this is the truth." I thanked her and told her not to feel guilty. The sadness had already been felt and passed. What I needed now was the full picture, so I could decide my next step. I called Uncle Jacob. He answered with the sound of a drill buzzing faintly in the background, probably fixing the fence. He spoke in that southern way, few words but straight to the point. "What's going on, girl?" I told him briefly about the Caribbean text. He gave a low grunt. "Yeah, I heard they booked that trip last month, but nobody asked you, did they?" I asked if he'd been invited. He laughed, dry as wind through old wood. "I live right here in Dallas, and I don't even know the exact day of your birthday, because everyone just assumes, oh, we already know." Then he shared something small, yet sharp enough to cut. 2 years ago, he drove over to deliver a new smoker grill for my dad, planning to stay and surprise me for my birthday. But when he got there, a big Bon Voyage Savannah banner hung across the yard. He set the grill down, turned his truck around, and thought, maybe next time. I sat silent, wondering how many times people might have intended to show up for me, only to be pushed aside by someone else's banner. Before hanging up, he said, "If you do something just for you, call me. I'll be there. I'll even bring the country band from church if you want." I chuckled under my breath. "You better keep that promise, Uncle. I need a table with live music." Last came Grandma Ruth in Tampa. She answered slowly, the sound of distant waves seeming to slip through the receiver. Maya, sweetheart, it's raining showers here in Tampa today. My voice softened, like when I was small and curled into her lap. Grandma, this year I don't have a party with Mom and Dad. I just want to ask, did you get any invitation? She sighed, the breath carrying the taste of salt. No, darling. I called your mother, and she said, we're keeping Savannah's house warm, and it made me cry. The day you were born, I held you in my arms. You had that patient gaze, and yet all these years, when it's your turn, the grown-ups keep saying, later. She told me that just a few days ago. She had texted my mother. Don't wait until the day you need a helping hand, and your daughter has already learned how not to need you. The message sat on scene. I bit my lip and thanked her for saying the words I hadn't dared to send. She asked me what I planned to do. I looked absently through the window, the Austin sky pale blue, sunlight slanting across a trail of golden dust. I want to have a real birthday, not grand, but with enough chairs. At Outer Banks, at my new house. I want to invite everyone who's ever had to give up their seat in this family. She was quiet for a few seconds, then giggled like a little girl. I'll bring lavender tea. You let me brew it. My hands aren't as strong anymore, but they're still steady enough to keep a teapot warm. When I hung up, I sat still, letting the 3 phone calls flow through me like streams joining into a single river. It became clear, this was no longer about me being overlooked. From Aunt Carol to Uncle Jacob to Grandma Ruth, there was an entire line of people quietly pressed against the edge of the table, too polite to intrude, too afraid of causing trouble, or too used to their names being skimmed over in the roll call. I remembered Aunt Carol's words. So many tables suddenly lost chairs for someone else. Then I knew I would rearrange the chairs, not to spite anyone, not to stage revenge photos, but to give back the feeling of belonging, the feeling a 12-year-old staring at extinguished candles had craved for 2 decades. I opened a new document and titled it, Maya 30. Long table. The first line I typed, no kids table. The second line, every person gets a handwritten name card. The third line, those once forgotten will be called first. I texted Aunt Carol. I want to invite everyone to Outer Banks this weekend. I'll handle lodging, food, transportation if needed. Just come. She replied as quickly as she always did. I'm in. I'll bring 2 jars of pickled vegetables and a pecan pie. I texted Uncle Jacob. I need live music. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji with, us old guys only know 3 chords, but we know how to laugh. I messaged Grandma. I booked a flight from Tampa to Norfolk and a rental car. Will you be able to make it? She answered with one word. Yes. Followed by a photo of her white porcelain teapot. Then I reached out to cousins who had stayed silent in group chats for years. Kayla in Richmond, Matt in Athens, Georgia, and a distant cousin in Virginia Beach I just reconnected with on Facebook. My message was warm, carefully avoiding words that might sound like retaliation. This weekend is my 30th birthday, and I want the people who've shown up in my life, but rarely been invited to the center of the table, to be there. If you're free, please come. The house is in Nag's Head. I'll send directions. No dress code, no gifts, just presents. On the other side, replies opened like windows catching fresh air. Kayla wrote, Forever Team Maya, I'm bringing lemon cake. Matt said he was scheduled to work that weekend but would try to switch shifts. The cousin in Virginia Beach offered her 7-seat SUV to pick people up from the airport if needed. Aunt Carol suggested I also invite Uncle Ray from Charlotte, who had once walked out in the middle of a 1 million followers party 2 years ago when his daughter burst into tears after being shoved out of a group photo. I hesitated for a second, would it be too many? But then reminded myself of the rule. At my table, there is always room. I added Uncle Ray's name to the list, with a note beside it. Seat him near Grandma Ruth, they'll have plenty to talk about. In the late afternoon, sunlight slanted across the row of houses as I sent an email to the OBX management company. Need deep cleaning, generator check, extra candles, plates, and glasses. Please place a fresh bouquet at the center of the table. I called Lena, a local event planner, and booked a simple setup. A white tent in case of rain, a few strings of small bulb lights, and long rustic wooden tables with benches. I called Chef Marcus to secure fresh crab and a batch of hot hush puppies, adding 2 pots of clam chowder for Grandma. Everything shifted into execution mode, as if all the years behind me had been training for this moment to use my logistics skills for one single purpose, so no one would ever have to stand on the porch, looking in through the glass. And when I printed out the guest list, pen in hand crossing off each name confirmed, I saw the outline of a gathering that belonged not just to me, but to all the empty chairs this family had once carried. From the confirmed list, I switched into full deployment mode, the way I would for opening a new warehouse: set timeline, budget, points of responsibility, risks, and contingency plans. For Outer Banks, the first problem was always transportation. I chose Raleigh-Durham, RDU, as the default airport for most relatives because of frequent flights and affordable fares, then a 3-hour drive out to Nags Head via US 64, crossing those long bridges that stretch across the Sound. I kept a group chat open with live location sharing and marked safe rest stops along the route. For Grandma Ruth, I held to my promise. Booked her flight Tampa, Norfolk, ORF. So the final drive would be just over 90 minutes, less tiring. I arranged for my cousin from Virginia Beach to pick her up in the SUV and stop at CoinJock to rest along the way. For those in Richmond, Raleigh, or Hampton Roads, I suggested a direct road trip and sent them a PDF, directions to the house, with photo references of the turns, because GPS in OBX sometimes reroutes travelers onto sandy back roads. In the group chat, I pinned the house address, the management company's phone number, and the 2 nearest hospitals with the note: if anything urgent happens, call 911 first, then ping me. I'll have my phone on speaker 24/7. Then, I locked in Lena, the local event planner, as the point person for the setup. A 40x60 white tent would be anchored with water barrels instead of deep stakes, since ocean winds can shift suddenly. A modular wooden floor would keep the ground dry, with a slip-resistant carpet running from the porch to the sand so kids and older guests wouldn't trip. Warm string lights would run along the beams, hung high enough that gusts wouldn't whip them into anyone's head. Plan B was to move everything into the great room. I remeasured the space, calculated seating for 1 long table and 2 round ones, planned to open the sliding doors for cross-ventilation, and relocated the speaker system into the library to keep sound levels contained. Quiet hours in Nags Head begin at 10 p.m. So, I wrote it on a small sign for the DJ table and reminded the band. Acoustic set starts at 9:30, speakers off at 10. After that, anyone who still wants to sing can gather in the living room with just an acoustic guitar. The band I chose was an indie group from Raleigh. They promised to play familiar songs in an acoustic style, avoiding tricky copyright issues, and they would bring a backup speaker in case the main equipment faltered in the humidity. Chef Marcus confirmed the seafood menu. Mini crab cakes as finger food, hot shrimp and grits, hush puppies fried on the spot, cucumber and red onion salad in vinegar for something light, 2 pots of clam chowder for Grandma and anyone avoiding spice, and a key lime pie to close. I reminded Marcus about seafood allergies: label everything clearly, use separate utensils. He nodded and said, "Give me the allergy list and I'll mark it on each ticket." Alma. For filming, I hired 2 people. 1 lead with a stabilized mirrorless camera, and 1 editor on site with a laptop and SSD backup drives. We agreed on a people first principle. Eye-level shots, no lingering pans of the house interior, no mention of the address, and at least a 12-hour posting delay for safety. I drafted a simple consent form to send ahead by email. Yes to appear, limited for partial or hands, only shots, no, to be excluded. At the event, I'd hand out 3 stickers to place on name cards, green, yellow, red, so the crew wouldn't make mistakes. A sign at the entrance would read, "Filming in progress, please let us know if you prefer not to be filmed," and a designated no camera zone inside the house would be roped off with a light cord and sign. I wanted everyone to feel respected before they felt seen. I laid out the budget on a sheet with 4 columns: estimate, deposit, remaining, and notes. For a party of around 50 people, I framed it between 45 and 60,000, covering everything so there would be no last-minute surprises. Catering from Marcus and his kitchen team would run about 18,000, including staff and ingredients. Tent, flooring, tables, linens, string lights, and heaters in case the night turned chilly. 8 to 10,000. Band and sound 3,000, plus 1,000 for tech. The filming crew 3.5 to 4.5 depending on how many pre-cut clips. Backup generator 710 kilowatts with fuel, 900. Small event and liability insurance, 1,200. Professional cleanup and recycling, 1,000. Fresh flowers, candles, handwritten signage, 1,200. Room gifts and printed keepsake photos, 800. Travel stipends for 2 elders and childcare, 1,500. And a 10% contingency because the Outer Banks always has a surprise. I scheduled deposits by milestone. 50% to Lena to lock the date, 30% to Marcus so he could secure seafood from Aquacoke, 25% to the band, 30% to the tent company. The rest would be paid after the event if no damages occurred. Weather was the biggest variable. That week, forecasts showed scattered showers off the coast with winds at 18 to 22 miles per hour. I requested the tent be anchored with wide straps and 55-gallon water barrels, with pull checks every 90 minutes. I added a clear windscreen on one side of the tent to hold warmth while still showing the sea, and rented 2 standing heaters for the older guests. The entry path was laid with rubber mats so wet sand wouldn't turn into a slip trap, and I placed a basket of dry towels on the porch so anyone caught in the rain could dry their hair before coming in. I tested the generator, fired it up, ran it on a 20-minute load, and taped quick start instructions to its casing. In the tool closet, I stocked a storm kit: tarps, duct tape, zip ties, flashlights, fresh AA batteries, and disposable rain ponchos for guests who forgot theirs. Inside the house, I walked through each room leaving personal markers. In Grandma Ruth's room, I hung a black and white photo of her holding me as a newborn, with a handwritten note at the bottom. "You once kept me safe in your arms. Tonight I invite you to the center of the table." I set a cushioned armchair for her, a non-slip bath mat, a shower seat, and suction grab bars so she could stand securely. In Aunt Carol's room, I placed 2 photocopied cookbooks of her handwritten recipes, spiral-bound now with a card tucked inside. "You were the first to name the dish I truly loved." For Uncle Jacob, I framed a backyard snapshot of him in a baseball cap grinning wide in 2003 and laid a printed ticket that read, "Join the band on stage, 3 chords are plenty." For the kids, I set out a lighthouse puzzle of the OBX, a shelf of crayons, and table mats to keep wax marks off the bedding. I wanted each person to open their door and find a fragment of their own memory, the way I had gathered mine over the years to stitch myself whole. I opened my checklist. T7, confirm vegetarian meals and allergy notes. T5, send travel instructions, gate code, and parking details. Only 4 spots in the driveway, the rest along the street with traffic flow. For anyone uncomfortable, I arranged a shuttle from the nearby public lot. T3, walk the property with Lena to mark tent placement, power lines, and breaker boxes. T2, move perishables into the garage cooler, test the long table setup in the great room, and measure wheelchair clearance. T1, receive flowers, test all lights, run a quick briefing with the crew about filming flow and consent stickers. On the day, set a war room. At the kitchen counter, a whiteboard with the timeline broken down into 15-minute blocks, names of people in charge, and a small bell I would ring whenever we shifted from food to music to keep the rhythm smooth. After the party, T+1. A family-style breakfast of scrambled eggs, toast, and fruit. Anyone leaving early would receive a small envelope with a printed photo from the night before and a folded note as a promise. See you next year. Die. I sent one more email to the management company. Please separate recycling with biodegradable bags, spray organic mosquito repellent around the porch and walkway the night before. Check septic reminder signs, no grease down the sink are already posted. I placed a sand bucket and a pail of water on the porch, so cigarette ash, if any, wouldn't blow into the grass, and I scheduled all ocean-facing lights to switch off after 11 to protect the sea turtles, per the town's guidelines. Every small detail came together into one larger feeling. When you set a new table, your responsibility is to make sure others can walk in without stumbling, sit without shivering, eat without guilt, and when they leave, they carry something of their own, not something of yours. I reviewed the budget one last time, shut my laptop, and wrote a short sentence by hand, taping it to the fridge as a reminder for myself and the team. Tonight's goal is not to impress anyone but to make someone feel called by name. The confirmation list began ticking upward like a countdown clock, and with each vibration of my phone I felt the long table in my mind stretch a little further. Grandma Ruth sent 3 words, "I'll be there," with a photo of a small suitcase. Aunt Carol wrote a longer note, listing pecan pie, pickled vegetables, embroidered handkerchiefs, and added, "I'm also bringing Band-Aids, in case anyone gets too enthusiastic cutting cake." Uncle Jacob replied with a photo of a guitar on the backseat of his pickup and the words, "Us old men have been practicing 3 chords all week." From Ohio, Cousin Ben announced he would drive overnight with his wife Lila because little Emma loves the ocean more than sleep. From Virginia, Kayla offered to pick up 2 other relatives in Richmond, so the car is full of laughter. From Georgia, Matt sent word that he'd managed to switch his weekend shift and attached a blinking birthday hat sticker. Each name that appeared, I opened the long table sheet, dragged a label, and added a small note. Grandma Ruth, armchair seat. Aunt Carol, near the kitchen so she can command dessert. Uncle Jacob, next to the band so he won't have to squeeze past people. Ben and Lila, by the door, close to the deck so Emma can run in and out. Kayla, in the middle to be the conversation anchor. Matt, beside Uncle Ray if he arrives, since they can talk baseball. I designed the seating chart like a supply chain route, alternating generations, alternating temperaments, mixing those who seldom speak with those who speak just enough. Like arranging goods by weight and frequency of use, so no shelf bears too much load for too long. The difference here was that each parcel was a heart, and my job was to place them where no one would have to lean against the edge of the table. And then there were the hesitant messages. Cousin Lucas in Columbus typed, "Maya, are you sure? I'm afraid. You know, drama." I almost laughed at the word, not with disdain but with recognition of the bone-deep weariness that came from dinners where every sentence felt like a trap. I didn't text back, I called. He answered quickly, his voice tense in a kind way. "I want to come, but if it turns into the same thing, someone brings up follower counts, someone compares schedules, I'm afraid it'll ruin a good day." I leaned against the window frame, watching sunlight slide across the deckwood, and spoke as clearly as if I were reading an oath. No comparisons, no follower counts, no talk of who's busier. No one will be filmed without consent. You'll get a red sticker on your name card if you want out. After 10 p.m., everything moves indoors, volume low, and if you need quiet, there's the library. And most important, if anyone tries to drag the conversation back to the old patterns, I'll block it with I want tonight to belong to the people who are here. I'm not staging a payback, Lucas. I'm just setting a table. On the other end, silence for a beat, then his breath eased out. "That sounds like peace, then I'll come, but where do I sit?" I smiled. "Next to Kayla. If you two can finish a 1,000-piece puzzle in under an hour, you're officially part of the table-setting team." He laughed, soft as a drizzle. "Deal." I dragged the cursor, placed Lucas to Kayla's left, and marked a small star. Conversation keeper. While the family group chat glowed with green dots from cousins and aunts, the parents and Savannah thread sat silent, like a stretch of sand without footprints. It wasn't that they hadn't seen the messages at the same time. Savannah's story popped up on my screen, a boomerang of glowing Port Miami, a mimosa glass tilting, captioned Bon Voyage with a ship emoji and number family trip. I glanced once and closed it, not out of bitterness, but because I was busy. Their silence had once felt like a wall, now it was just another sky. I didn't need to shout into it to hear my own voice. I sent one last short message to the immediate family group. The house will be open all day Saturday. If you change your mind, just come. No questions, no blame. Then I closed the chat window as though setting a seashell on the table. Whoever wanted to listen could press it to their ear. My seating chart grew into a warm map. I decided on one long table only, no kids' table, no women's side or men's side. At the center sat Grandma Ruth, not as a guest of honor, but so she wouldn't have to crane her neck or sit in the draft. To her right, Aunt Carol, she and Grandma could trade dishes like commanders of the kitchen. To her left, Uncle Ray, if he arrived, his deep laugh filling the pauses. A little further down, I placed Matt between two elders so he could learn to listen to old stories, while Emma, Ben's daughter, sat between Ben and Kayla, one to help with puzzles, the other to lead her outside when she grew restless. Lucas sat opposite Kayla, their line of conversation stretching steady across the table. Uncle Jacob was near the end, close to the band, so when he rose to play he'd only need to turn his chair and strum. Lila, Ben's wife, sat beside Aunt Carol to learn the pecan pie recipe. At the very end, I replaced a single chair with a bench, the flex seat for latecomers, children who liked to swap places, or anyone who needed a spot just in case emotions ran high. No one would be boxed in, but every seat carried meaning. I handwrote each name card on ivory paper with thin borders, ink slanting softly. Beneath every name, I added a line only that person would understand. Beneath Kayla, the hand from summer 2006, the one that kept the match from going out. Beneath Lucas, the steady breath in the room. Beneath Ben, the long road from Ohio never tires the heart. On the wooden table, I laid a linen runner, the color of sand, with glass jars of seagrass and a few low candles so every pair of eyes could meet across the glow. Small plates were set for crab cakes, with separate tongs, and a bowl of pink salt sat in the center as a reminder that every flavor had its place. At the foot of each chair lay a thin folded blanket. The sea breeze could turn sudden, like memory, and anyone who felt cold could pull it over themselves without asking. The night before guests arrived, I sent one last message in the long table group. Ground rules for tomorrow. 1. Everyone has a seat, there is no side table. 2. If you need quiet, the library is open, with hot tea and colored pencils. 3. We speak in I, not on behalf of others. 4. Go to bed early tonight so tomorrow we'll have the strength to hug each other tight. Almost instantly, Kayla dropped a heart, Lucas a small green comma. Ben sent a photo of Emma hugging her stuffed sea bear. Grandma Ruth sent a teapot emoji. Aunt Carol a snapshot of a pecan pie pan just pulled from the oven. I looked at those little signals and felt that the long table I'd been imagining had already begun to make sound, the scrape of chairs pulling closer, the clink of dishes, the sound of names being called without microphones. And amid all the things I had arranged, there was one space I deliberately left untouched, the space reserved for explanations. They weren't needed here. Here, only those who came, sat down, and shared a meal without anyone being pushed aside. Morning broke over the Outer Banks with its own kind of light. Silver across the ocean, pale gold on the dunes, honey, warm on the wooden deck of my house. I stepped barefoot onto the porch, checklist in hand, hearing the Atlantic wind tap lightly against the railing like a drumbeat overture. Along the banister, the fairy lights I had strung the night before lay still like tired fireflies, waiting for the sun to dip so they could flare alive. At the end of the deck, I had set up a small wicker-lined counter with a chalkboard sign reading, Mocktail Bar, handwritten. Sea foam, lemon soda with a splash of mint syrup and coconut foam topping. Sand dune lemonade, yellow lemon with a slice of cucumber and a pinch of sea salt. And OBX sunset, orange juice with pomegranate over crushed ice. For the kids, I prepared sturdy lidded cups so the wind wouldn't tip them. For the adults, a corner of wine inside the house, kept away from the deck so the sea breeze wouldn't carry the sharp scent. The air mixed salt, damp wood, and linen dried overnight. It felt like the house itself was breathing slowly, ready to welcome people in. On the sand below, Lena's crew was finishing the wooden flooring panels and testing the clear windscreen along one side of the tent. I walked around, touching each tie-down, checking the 55-gallon water barrels anchoring the poles, then looked up at the strand of warm bulbs running along the beams. In daylight, they were just beads of glass, but by night they would soften like stars pulled low by the wind. Lena pointed out where the long table would sit and asked if I wanted extra chairs at the end. I nodded, and with my own hands carried 2 wooden chairs from inside, setting them beside the bench. A small gesture, but for me a ritual. At my table, there is always room. I looked at the row of seats marked with handwritten name cards and saw the picture forming clearly. Grandma Ruth at the center, surrounded by those who had sent on my way, arriving late, or, simply, yes. Not one seat labeled kids, not one pushed to the edge as if made for someone ready to leave. In the kitchen, Chef Marcus was testing the first batch of hush puppies, the sound of oil sizzling as crisp as laughter about to break out. He lifted each golden cornmeal ball into a wire basket, dusted them with fine salt, and explained that the cornmeal came from a small mill in Manteo, true Carolina style, not too sweet. On the counter beside him, trays of crab cakes sat in precise rows, each one thick and firm, golden-edged, the filling packed with blue crab and shrimp. Marcus said the crab had come fresh that morning from Wanchese, the shrimp from the Pamlico Sound. You have to shop from the right hands. On the stove, the shrimp and grits steamed rich with butter and black pepper. The grits, stone-ground, still had a gentle bite, blending with garlic butter shrimp into the perfect warmth for sea air. I opened the fridge to check 2 chilled key lime pies, their tart filling made from a shipment of limes sent from Florida the week before. The topping was hand-whipped cream, not meringue, so the wind wouldn't eat the surface. I wrote small cards to place before each dish, not only so guests would know what they were eating, but to preserve the story of origin, because this meal was never meant to be a showcase spread, but a map of the people who had touched it before we sat down at the table. The filming system was switched on the way a warehouse shift begins, with process, boundaries, and clear responsibility. Camera 1, a mirrorless on a gimbal, had the role of walking with people, moving from porch to kitchen, from dining table to deck, always keeping the viewer's eye level at the same height as the guests, so no one ever felt looked down upon. Camera 2 stood fixed on a tripod in the left corner of the great room, framing the long table, recording only the flow of the story: who poured water for whom, who knelt to tie a child's shoelace without zooming, without hunting moments. The drone was just a supplement, a small one under 250 grams. I had registered it, passed trust, marked the registration number, checked on B4 UFOI that the sky over Nag's Head was Class G and uncontrolled. Notes were clear: fly low, under 200 feet, never over the crowd, never toward the neighbors' homes, 1 takeoff at golden hour if winds stayed under 15 miles per hour. I wasn't asking for a show flight, just a brief circle to let us see the ocean together, then land. The crew understood. The drone could be cancelled at any moment if the wind shifted. People mattered more than frames. For privacy, I placed a sign at the entrance beside the mocktail bar. Filming in progress, tell us your preference. Each name card carried a round sticker. Green meant fine to film, yellow, distance only divided by no close-ups. Red, no filming. I prepared a short consent form sent ahead by email and printed copies on site for elders, 2 short lines. I agree divided by I do not agree to appear in photos divided by videos. Maya intends to share, with checkbox, signature, and phone number, so if anyone changed their mind later, I'd know how to find them and cut their appearance from the published version. Inside, I strung soft silk cords to mark 2, no camera zones, the library, armchairs, warm lamps, a box of colored pencils, and the north-facing reading room, teapot, cookies, and a small desk bell, so anyone closing the door would do it gently. I wanted every step taken to be clear about where it was headed and what rights came along with it. I walked along the deck, sliding each glass door open to test the airflow, shifting the vases of seagrass so their shadows wouldn't fall across faces once the sun dipped. Lena asked if I wanted a photo backdrop. I shook my head. Instead, I hung a simple rope with wooden clips so anyone who wished could pin their own Polaroid. The backdrop would be the ocean, the fairy lights, and the people looking at each other. I placed a few folding chairs by the doorway, a silent invitation for anyone still hesitant. Come in if you're not ready to sit, the chairs will wait. On the long table, I spread the sand-colored linen runner, tucked in stalks of dried reeds, set low candles. Stepping back, I took it in. No garish colors, no party banners, just warm light and air that felt like a long sigh being released. My phone buzzed, messages popping up one after another. Here. Just arrived. I looked down at the driveway. Kayla's SUV slid in first, Emma's face pressed to the window, eyes sparkling like drops of water. Uncle Jacob's pickup behind it, an amp strapped tight in the bed. Aunt Carol climbing out clutching the pecan pie box like a family secret, and in the back seat of Ben's sedan. I glimpsed the corner of a drawing. Emma had made a long sand-colored table dotted with round heads, and a crooked heart at the center. I opened the door, the wind rushed in, salty and warm, and though the fairy lights weren't lit yet, the rooms already glowed. From the kitchen Marcus called, "Second batch of hush puppies is up." I reminded him, "Save a plate for Grandma," and set a small card in front of the crab cakes. Wanchese blue crab good because it traveled just far enough. How? I heard the soft scrape of sand under sandals on the steps, someone shushing the group so they could hear the surf, and in my head, steady as a vow, my voice repeated, "At my table, there is always room." The first sound was tires crunching on damp gravel, then car doors opening, footsteps scattering grit across the sand, and someone exclaiming, "Oh, the ocean." Like laughter breaking free. Kayla bounded up the steps and hugged me so tightly I could hear the fairy lights on the railing tremble. Behind her, Emma shuffled forward, holding steady a sand-colored card, letters carefully inked in marker. "Happy 30, cousin." The word cousin stood larger than the rest, its border rimmed with seashells she had collected along the shore. I knelt so Emma could place it in my hands herself, like setting a stone on a milestone, breathing in the mix of craft, glue, and salt air before kissing her hair still dusted with sand. Aunt Carol slipped straight into the kitchen without needing direction, lifting the lid from her still warm pecan pie. Uncle Jacob cradled his guitar like a secret, his wife Linda hanging her coat neatly on the hook, scanning the consent stickers, and cheerfully choosing a green one. I'm fine being filmed from a distance. And Grandma Ruth appeared last, her hand resting lightly on Kayla's arm, her smile steady as an anchor. From the kitchen, Marcus carried out the third batch of hush puppies, the scent of oil and butter mingling in the air, each person who passed snatching one, blowing hard before laughing through, "Too hot." Anyway. The current of people rose like a tide, food settling onto tables, conversations sparking at each small point of contact. Ben noticed Lucas struggling with his bow tie and stepped in to fix it. Emma, with trembling hands but fierce care, poured an OBX Sunset mocktail into Grandma's glass. Linda pulled over a folding chair for a cousin arriving late, the chair I had set aside as a promise to myself. At my table, there is always room. The drone rose once, a single loop at sunset, its hum small as a bee, arcing above the roofline, dipping low enough to catch Emma spinning around the bench, her hair flying behind her in the wind. Then it landed immediately, crew following instructions exactly. People were the focus. The sky was only the backdrop. When everyone had a glass in hand, I stood at the head of the table, raising mine just high enough for the string lights above to catch and scatter a thin reflection. I hadn't written anything down. I just breathed in and spoke slowly so the wind wouldn't carry my words away. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for driving the distance, for switching shifts, for bringing pies, music, and stories we haven't had the chance to tell. Tonight is not about comparing who is busier, who is worth more. Tonight is only about looking around and knowing that the person beside you chose to be here. That is enough for my 30th birthday. I clinked glasses first with Kayla, then with Grandma Ruth. She tapped so lightly, as if afraid to shatter the fragile bubble of the moment, but her eyes held steady with the strength of an ancient blessing. The meal unfolded like a slow, steady dance. Crab cakes passed too quickly to cool, cucumber and red onion salad refreshing as a breeze slipping between waves. The pot of shrimp and grits warm and rich with butter and garlic shrimp that loosened everyone's guard. Kayla told the story of their car veering onto a sandy road. Lucas confessed he had nearly turned back halfway, fearing drama, but pressed the gas for 5 more minutes, and those 5 minutes carried him to a table with enough seats. Grandma Ruth didn't eat quickly. She traced the rim of her plate as if reading a page, then suddenly set her spoon down, turned to me, eyes damp but voice clear as a bell. "This birthday of yours, there are no empty chairs." End of 3. The whole table went silent for a beat, like a wave dipping low to gather strength. I wanted to answer, but my throat locked at the simplicity and wholeness of her words, one short sentence that stitched closed a tear years long. I only laid my hand on hers and nodded. Someone at the far end whispered, "Amen," though no one could tell who. The band began their first set just as the sun pulled its last threads of light from the railing. They chose soft acoustic pieces, sometimes familiar strands of classic rock like Landslide, no lyrics, just the chorus of chords and a raw voice telling the story of changing seasons. Guitar strings rippled under the sound of waves. Truthfully, on that deck, every song became the song of the sea. Uncle Jacob blushed when I waved him up. He strummed his 3 practiced chords, the band followed his rhythm, and the whole table tapped spoons against glasses in time. Emma danced barefoot, while Lila tugged Aunt Carol onto the deck. At first she shook her head furiously. "Oh, I'm clumsy," but then let herself be led, their laughter spilling like 2 teenagers at a school dance. Kayla helped Grandma Ruth to her feet. They didn't dance, only swayed, Grandma resting her cheek against Kayla's shoulder for a moment. And my chest tightened with a kind of happiness that asked for no words. The crew kept their promise, no zooming in on interiors or objects, only capturing gestures between people. The camera followed slowly behind Ben as he bent to tie Emma's shoelace, lingered just long enough to catch Linda draping a light shawl over a cousin's shoulders when the wind suddenly whipped. Then eased back to frame the entire long table as hands reached at once for the salt or passed dishes down. The fixed camera in the great room occasionally caught a burst of laughter on someone's face, then almost politely let that expression fade into the kitchen, where Marcus was ladling more chowder. The drone never rose again. We didn't need the sky a second time for this story. During a slow waltz, Lucas leaned toward me. "Thank you for calling me," he said. "The way you talked about boundaries, it let me breathe easy." I answered, "Thank you for coming. Here, everyone has the right to breathe easy." Then Aunt Carol pulled out a seashell-shaped birthday candle from nowhere, grinning mischievously. I came prepared with props. Kayla struck a match. I cupped the flame with my hand, and Emma counted softly, 1, 2, 3. No one urged anyone to grab their phones. No one said, "Wait for better light." Just a small circle around a single ordinary flame. I made a wish that hardly sounded like a wish. "Let this table be full again next year." I blew gently. The flame went out without shattering, quiet as a period at the end of a sentence. The key lime pie was set down, its tart freshness pulling everyone a little closer together. Grandma Ruth ate slowly, her eyes smiling before her mouth. Aunt Carol winced at the sourness, then nodded approvingly. Marcus stood back, watching everyone eat dessert like a director seeing his final scene land. I poured Uncle Jacob another glass of water. He said, 3 chords are enough. I replied, enough for everyone to know the words. We both laughed. In the kitchen, I scribbled a few quick lines onto thank you cards that would go into envelopes the next morning. Thank you for showing up. I thought, maybe that's all I'll ever write in this life, but if it's written to the right people, at the right moment, it's enough. The moment I remember most wasn't cheers or applause, but a shared silence. When the band dropped to nothing but finger-picked strings and the sound of waves, when everyone leaned their hands on the table and turned their eyes toward the Black Sea, no one spoke. I could hear the linen brushing softly against the wood, the faint clink of spoons on plates, and the deep breaths of people who had traveled a long way not only on the map. That was when I knew the old empty chair had been filled, not by any one person, but by the way we sat together. Near 10 o'clock, I signaled the band to move their acoustic set inside. The fairy lights on the deck stayed lit but dimmed low. I gathered the thin blankets, tucked one over Grandma's legs, pulled out chairs for those wanting to lean back. In the great room, a few children sprawled on the woven rug piecing together a lighthouse puzzle. Lucas and Kayla sat in the library, sliding the last puzzle pieces into place, looking as though they were finishing a map abandoned long ago. The crew asked permission to take one final wide shot indoors from a distant corner, faint and unobtrusive, then drifted into the kitchen, pouring themselves water and nodding at Marcus like teammates at the end of a shift. When I walked Grandma Ruth to her room, she paused at the door, gently squeezed my hand. "You've done something we grown-ups sometimes forget, adding another chair." I hugged her, resting my head against her shoulder as I had when I was 12. But this time, there were no extinguished candles, no knife passing to someone else. Outside, laughter still flickered like fireflies, music no longer background but almost like someone knocking softly from inside the heart. I closed her door, leaned against the wall, shut my eyes for a second to store away the exact gold of the lights, the cool citrus of pie, and her words, steady as a new anchor line. That night, no phone call interrupted, no message asked who posted the clip. Only bare feet padding softly across wooden floors, hugs held longer than usual, and the sense of a house being used exactly for what it was built for, to set a table wide enough for those who chose to sit and stay. And in the wind rushing through the railing, I heard the sound I had hunted for all evening, the sound of an empty chair, disappearing. After the party, when the fairy lights flickered faintly like tired fireflies and the waves pressed the sand in steady layers, Kayla sat at the library table with her laptop open, the crew's hard drive already plugged in. Her hair was still dusty with sand, her fingers quick, pulling clips into the timeline. I stood behind her for a moment, then stepped back, letting her work in the rhythm of someone who knew timing. The hook had to land in the first seconds, pacing held under 30, text clear and warm, audio letting people hear arms around arms, not just music. She chose to open with the candle flame being shielded from the wind, followed 3 seconds later by Grandma Ruth's giggle over her first spoonful of chowder, then cut lightly into Uncle Jacob strumming his 3 chords, Emma bouncing on the deck, and closed with a slow pan across the long table as everyone lifted their eyes to the dark sea. In the top left corner, Kayla typed simple white text, "When your parents sail away for your 30th but family shows up anyway." And at the 21-second mark, she overlaid the promise I had taped to the fridge. "There's always a seat at my table." She kept the original audio of the night laughter breaking as plates passed, glasses clinking softly, the surf and the acoustic guitar no copyrighted overlay so the algorithm wouldn't block it, and so people could hear what was real. Instead of a location tag, Kayla added alt text, "Family dinner by the ocean, one long table, everyone included," so anyone using a screen reader could feel present too. She double-checked the consent list. Every face in frame had a green sticker, those with yellow appeared only in wide shots, never close up. And the cousin with a red sticker, the one who arrived late, was blurred gently at the shoulder, exactly as her checkbox read, limited divided by number. Color stayed untouched, grading kept light so the sea didn't look artificial and skin tones didn't flatten into something unreal. When the clip hit exactly 29 seconds, Kayla exported 2 versions, one for Instagram Reels, one for TikTok, allow remix turned on but duets blocked from zooming in too close. The caption stayed brief, not bitter. "They sailed, we gathered. No hard feelings, just gratitude for those who show up." Just 3 soft hashtags, number family dinner, number Outer Banks, number seat for everyone. She pressed publish at midnight. The device buzzed once, quiet as dropping a pebble into dark water. By morning the water had rippled into waves. As I boiled water for Grandma Ruth's tea, Kayla's phone lit up with a storm of icons, hearts, comments, shares, saves. The algorithm caught on the opening hook the words, "Parents sail away," flashing within 0.3 seconds, then held viewers with the 4 things social platforms always reward: genuine laughter, an embrace, golden hour light, and a clear story beat being left behind yet choosing to open the door. Retention spiked past the 3rd and 10th second marks. Viewers replayed the clip of Grandma Ruth saying, "This birthday, there are no empty chairs." We had added careful subtitles, and then scrolled down to the caption. Many left the same comment, as if prearranged. "Thank you for this. Not wow, beautiful house, not fancy food, but thank you for showing me a table with more seats." Within hours, the clips crossed what Kayla jokingly calls the awake and seeking softness threshold. Students, night shift workers, nursing mothers, insomniac elders, people sitting in the dark, phones glowing, seeing a wooden deck, strangers hugging, a grandmother laughing, and a table with no empty chairs. I realized exactly what kept them there, the tone of kindness in the caption. No blame, no calling out, just the line. No hard feelings, just gratitude. And the overlay. "There's always a seat at my table," turned the clip from my story into an invitation anyone could claim as theirs. By noon, a local Outer Banks community page, the kind that usually posts about weather and tides, reshared the reel with the caption, "Sometimes the best OBX moments are about people, not places." They didn't tag the house, didn't ask where exactly, only wrote, "If you recognize anyone, send them a blessing." Another local account, a beach cleanup volunteer group, reposted with, "The long table is beautiful, but even more beautiful is no trash on the table or underfoot. Thank you for respecting the ocean." The inbox swelled like a gentle tide. "My parents skipped my graduation. This healed something tonight. We've been the forgotten cousins too. Thank you for setting one table. Our Nana passed last year. Seeing your grandma smile felt like a hug." One message came from a fisherman in Manteo, attached with a photo of calloused fingers from pulling nets. "Wanche's blue crab, you captioned it right. Thank you for naming our place with respect." I read each note, replied to only a few, but always sincerely. "Thank you for sharing. I hope you find your own chair. Thank you for catching the crab that made it to our table." I tried not to turn the inbox into a counseling booth. Last night's mission had been to set the table. Today's mission was to listen and to keep the quiet intact. Virality didn't arrive like fireworks bright and gone, but like waves rolling in, layer after layer. Kayla showed me the retention chart. Viewers stayed until second 26, waiting for the final scene where the overlay appeared with laughter. Shares peaked among the 25-44 age group, often with personal notes attached. "Missed birthday too. Gave up my seat too. Cake delayed for someone else's spotlight too." I saw those twos strung together like the fairy lights across the railing last night, each bulb a life of its own, but warm when strung side by side. Operationally, we followed every safeguard, so not a single comment had to be hidden for privacy violations. A distant relative messaged asking us to remove a frame where their child appeared in the corner. Kayla opened the project, cropped, re-uploaded, and the clip kept its rhythm. The band asked if they could post a 15-second segment of their set. I sent them a cut file with a reminder to add the text. "No credits needed. Thanks for playing from the heart." Marcus wanted to share a shot of the Hush Puppies, the crowd favorite. I agreed, on one condition: no house tags. He posted a photo of hands reaching for the basket, captioned, "Food tastes better when the table has enough seats." Not a single person asked, "How much was the house?" No one pried, "Were there celebrities?" because the clip never placed value on anything but the people present and their kindness to one another. Still, we kept precise location off, locked comments to followers and following for easier moderation, and Kayla set a keyword filter to block words that might tilt the tone. By afternoon, the OBX group chats were buzzing about the long dinner table by the sea at some house in Nag's Head. Strangely, no one hunted for an address, they only shared the overlay line. An English teacher in Kill Devil Hills used the clip in class, asking students to write about a time someone made space for you. She messaged me, and I felt my throat tighten as I read it. A small church on Roanoke Island dropped a heart and wrote, "Thank you for reminding us how to set the table." A few DMs pushed toward interviews, wanting to know the other side of the story, why my parents and Savannah weren't there. I sent the same gentle reply each time. Thank you for caring. Last night's story was about those who chose to show up. I didn't want the clip to turn into a courtroom, it was a table. As dusk came again, Kayla sat beside me on the porch steps. We both held our phones but didn't glance over to ask, how many views now? She rested her head on my shoulder, her voice small, like when she was 17. Sis, people aren't just watching because it's beautiful, they're watching because they see a place for themselves. I nodded. I remembered what I had said in my toast the night before. Just to look around and know the person next to you chose to be here. It turns out the internet, used rightly, can be a long table too borderless, where each person leaves a comment like setting down a spoon, tilting their head, and saying, thank you. I don't know how far this wave will travel, who will see it, or what words will be written next. But I do know one thing. Last night, we built something hard to break, a clip that carried the weight of an invitation. And as the notifications kept blinking with tiny hearts, I heard Grandma Ruth calling from inside, "The tea's gone cold, dear." Her voice drifted down the hallway like a gentle soundtrack, reminding me that every viral moment must eventually return to where it belongs. Rinsing glasses, stacking chairs, and keeping the tea warm for those who will gather at this table again next year. The morning after Kayla's clip began rising like a warm tide. The house was so quiet I could hear the kettle bubbling and the wind threading through the railings. I was steeping tea for Grandma Ruth when my phone buzzed nonstop, my mother's name lit sharp on the screen like a harsh lamp. I looked at Grandma, she nodded gently. Answer, dear. All Lubrovox. I put the call on speaker, set the phone on the wooden table in the great room, the lingering scent of key lime pie mixing with the warmth of lavender tea. My mother's voice leapt in without pause. Maya, what are you doing? The whole family is talking about your party. People think your father and I are villains. The pastor even texted asking, is everything all right? Do you have any idea how we look right now? I breathed slow, letting her words pass like white foam on the surf, and answered with a calm so steady it sounded to me like another voice. I invited everyone because I wanted to belong, Mom. Not to shame anyone. I didn't mention your name, I didn't blame anyone. That dinner was for those who chose to show up. The line went quiet for a beat. I heard a different wind, the whine of sea air across a ship's deck hiss through her mic, then her voice rose louder, as though she had to shout over the engines. But why let it be filmed? Why put it on the internet? Did you even think about the family? My eyes drifted to the corner of the room where the no camera zone sign still hung like a promise. I recalled every green, yellow, red sticker placed on name cards, Kayla's careful caption. No hard feelings, and I said, I filmed people-to-people moments, Mom. No address, no faces without consent, no words of attack. I invited you too, the doors open all day Saturday, you saw the message. Grandma Ruth set her teacup down, her tea-colored eyes fixed on the phone, her voice not loud but steady as a wedge of wood holding a door in place. Patricia, I have kept quiet too long. You've missed your daughter's birthdays many times not because you didn't know, but because it was convenient to move them aside. When she was 12, you delayed the cake for her sister's live stream. At 18, you let her spend her birthday at a book fair. At 21, she paid for her own Tex-Mex dinner so she wouldn't bother anyone. Last night wasn't revenge, she set out more chairs. Oh. I wanted to whisper, Grandma, but my throat locked because for once I felt someone was standing beside me at the center of the table. On the other end, my mother burst out, words tumbling. Mother, we only wanted to keep things simple. The cruise was booked already. Savannah had a content contract, we couldn't just cancel. And Maya is always so busy with her work, we thought she didn't need it. The phrase "didn't need it" struck my ear like a spoon scraping an empty plate. All these years, No words had ever made me feel both so sad and so calm. Before I could respond, my father's voice slid in low as always, now forced into gentleness. Maya, listen to me. We booked this trip months ago. Canceling would have lost us all the money. I thought you knew. I figured we could make up your birthday later. As for what people are saying, you know how our community island. He added a few more phrases. Everyone's busy. Don't blow this up. Our family isn't like what it looks like online, as if tossing dust in the air could blur the glare enough to keep from squinting. I didn't want my words to land like an axe splitting the table. I waited until his sentences had fallen, then gathered the pieces into my own. I understand bookings, I understand deposits, I understand the community. But some things cannot be made up like an empty chair on the day I turned 30. I didn't invite people to replace you, or mom, or anyone. I invited them because I am tired of standing outside the window of my own life. The phone buzzed with a banner sliding across the top. Savannah, drama queen. 2 clipped words, her familiar shrug digitized. I didn't open it, didn't let it knock me off balance. My voice held steady. Savannah, if you're listening on speaker, I'll say it plain. Last night wasn't a performance. There was food, there was laughter, elders leaning on younger shoulders, children counting candles. If you call that drama, then I hope your life is full of it, the kind with real people. Silence stretched on the other end, broken only by a distant ship's horn. Grandma Ruth slipped in, like someone tapping a spoon to bring the conversation back to rhythm. Robert, Patricia, you had every right to take a vacation, no one forbids it. But when you said, just immediate family, and used it to cut out the rest, then blamed her for finding family elsewhere, that's not her fault. I've watched her stitch each tear shut with silence for years. Last night, she stitched with voices. My mother exhaled sharply, the breath turning into an overused refrain. I didn't mean to hurt her, I just thought. I cut in softly, without rancor. You don't need to think for me anymore, just listen. I said aloud what I'd written in my head for years, but for the first time with witnesses at the table. I didn't call to demand an apology. I didn't open my house to shame you. I don't want the internet to be a courtroom. I only want to say, clearly, that I won't sit in that empty chair again. I've set another table. If one day you want to sit, I'll pull up a chair. And if you'd rather keep your cruises, your photo shoots, your silences, I respect that too. Just don't tell me to not make a big deal when I celebrate my own birthday. On the line, I heard my father clear his throat, small, like testing the range of a new note. I understand part of it now. My mother didn't answer right away. The wind noise in the mic softened, as if they'd stepped into a sheltered corner. Then her voice came, lower, like a door cracked open. Could you send me a picture? Not to post, just so I can see your table. I looked at Grandma Ruth. She gave a slight nod. I opened the album from last night and chose the frame Kayla had shot on film. The long table facing the sea, faces imperfect but lit, Grandma Ruth's hand over mine. I sent it into the family chat, without a single word. Over speaker, my mother exhaled again, this time not in frustration, but like breath after a long run. Beautiful table, she said. Everyone looks happy. Before the call could slide into negotiation, Savannah's banner popped up again. Don't milk social media pity. I let the words drift past like trash on the tide, untouched. I turned back to the call. I'm not milking pity, and I'm not selling sadness. The only thing I put out was presence, and that's exactly what I received. Dad murmured. All right, that's enough. The way someone tries to smother a fire by slapping a lid on the pot. I lifted the lid in another way, with a boundary line as clear as chalk on pavement. I'm not here to reconcile, Mom, Dad. I'm setting a boundary. When you're ready to listen, I'll be here. If not, please respect my birthday, and from now on, please respect the tables I set. I looked at Grandma Ruth. She laid her hand warm across mine. Patricia, she said, this child isn't a child anymore. She's learned how to pull out chairs. Sometimes being a mother just means sitting down. 1. On the other end, silence stretched long. I thought I heard the sound of two seas folding into each other, the Atlantic in Nag's head, the Caribbean against the hull of their ship. Then my father, rarely the one to end calls, spoke the last line. "I'll call again later." My mother only managed, "Maya, and left it hanging, like an anchor caught midair. I didn't push, didn't pull. "I'm making breakfast," I said. "Toast, scrambled eggs. If you call back and I don't pick up, it's because I'm pouring tea for Grandma." I pressed the red button. The screen went dark, smooth as still water. The room returned to the sound of boiling tea and fairy lights flickering faintly in the daytime, as if no gust from a distant ship had ever passed through. Grandma Ruth squeezed my hand, offered no consolation, only asked, "Egg soft or medium?" I laughed, the laugh of someone who's just set down a heavy load without cracking the tiles. In my mind, I saw my table again, the chairs filled, the chairs waiting, and one seat always open for real listening. Savannah's text still hovered, a scrap of paper in the air. I left it where it belonged. Not in my heart, not on my table, just in the bin of soon seen, soon forgotten. I poured Grandma's tea, lifted the pan of eggs, and in the smell of hot butter I repeated to myself the line I had spoken and now clung to like an anchor. "When they're ready to listen, I'll be here. If not, respect my birthday." Outside, the wind shifted, and for one brief second, I heard the ocean sound like applause. That noon, while Marcus and I fried off the last batch of hush puppies for a late breakfast, my phone flickered nonstop, bright as sun scattering on water. Comments poured in under Kayla's reel, not just "so beautiful," but pieces of life laid down softly like spoons against plates. "My parents missed my graduation. Seeing your table eased something in me. When I was 14, my cake was pushed aside for my brother's urgent thing. Thank you for relighting the candles. I live in Kitty Hawk, and I've never seen a long table feel so warm." I couldn't reply to them all, so I gave myself a rhythm. Each hour, 5 stories, answered in the tone I wanted to keep. "Thank you for sharing. I hope you find your seat." No judgments, no rehashing old wounds. The internet that day felt, strangely, like a warm kitchen. People stepping in turn, placing their stories on the counter, pouring a little hot water, then moving gently on. Messages came from distant relatives too, names I'd only seen at holidays for years. A cousin in Oklahoma confessed, "I stayed silent because I didn't want to upset anyone. Sorry, I just drifted with the current." An uncle in San Antonio wrote, "I thought you were strong enough not to need anyone, but maybe being too strong made the rest of us forget to ask, 'Do you need me?'" I sat on the porch steps replying line by line, not taking on extra guilt, not over-soothing, just acknowledging and opening a door. "Next time you're there, I'll keep a chair for you." Those apologies didn't erase past seasons, but they felt like someone slipping a wedge under a wobbly table so it finally steadied. At 2:14 p.m. Dad sent an email, titled, "About last night." I opened it to find sentences long as highways, some stalling, some clogged with commas. He wrote about booking the cruise months ago, about not wanting to hurt you but thinking you were too busy, about "we don't understand social media," and the weight of familiar community eyes. Between his justifications, there were threads of truth. When I read about your table, I realized it's something I haven't sat at in too many years. End of. I stopped there, breathing like someone standing at the shore who knows they don't need to swim out too far. I didn't reply right away. I labeled it, "For tonight," and drafted a short response. "Thank you for writing. I need time. Next time we meet, please listen all the way through." I left it unsent. I've learned some answers should be left to steep until they're ready. Mom texted later, not a call, just a short line. "Come to Dallas and talk, okay? Not online." I looked at those words and felt a quiet gratitude that her tone had shifted from "what people think" to "what we say." I typed back, "I need time. When we talk, I want Grandma or Aunt to be there. And I want it in a calm place, not over a meal." I ended with a period, leaving no space for an argument by text. That whole day, I held to one principle: minimal replies, clear boundaries. Savannah was different. Her story went up in the afternoon, white text over the pale blue Caribbean sky. Some people love making a spectacle. With a boomerang of a foaming cocktail. I glanced at the comments beneath. She hadn't locked the story. Let her have her day. Not everything is about you, Sav. One longtime follower wrote, I've adored your travel vlogs, but empathy looks better on you than eye rolls. For the first time, I didn't feel any need to step in and correct. The community did what I never asked of them. They turned the lens the right way, not to shame, but to remind. I stayed silent. Silence no longer felt like enduring, it was an answer with edges. I spent an hour that afternoon cleaning the backstage of virality the way you clean a kitchen after a party. Adjusting settings, adding filters to block words that could warp the tone. Sending Kayla a list of 5 comments worth responding to because they carried deep personal stories. Notifying the crew about a request to blur a watermark connected to a yellow sticker guest, they handled it in 10 minutes. Marcus texted, Can I post the Hush Puppies recipe? I replied, Yes, but caption it food tastes better when the table has enough seats. The band asked for a 12-second clip to share with the tag, Play from the Heart. I sent it with one note. Don't tag the house address. Late in the afternoon, I opened my own Instagram, tapped into the caption box, deciding I wouldn't let Kayla speak entirely for me. I didn't recount any drama. I chose a photo of young hands resting on old bathed in a thin wash of gold light over the knuckles. Beneath it, I wrote, Every table should have a seat for the ones who were once forgotten. On the next line, Last night, we didn't talk about who was absent, we called the names of those present. If you've ever stood before an empty chair, I hope one day you sit where your name is spoken. I pinned the post to the top of my page, turned off location, kept comments open, and reminded everyone of the rule. Speak in, not for others. Within an hour, the post filled with lines beginning I once, in English, in Spanish, even a single Vietnamese comment drifting in like another breeze. Cảm ơn vì đã đặt thêm ghế. Thank you for setting more seats. I felt as though I'd placed a small sign at the table's edge. This is why we gather. That night, Dad's email still sat in the For Tonight label. I reread it, trimming away the looping explanations, holding on only to the few drops of truth he had managed to pour out. I pressed send on the short reply I had drafted. Thank you for writing, Dad. I've read it. I need time. When we meet, please listen fully before explaining. Next time, I want our conversation not to happen over a meal, so the table is just for eating and for calling each other's names. I called Mom, so they'd both know I wasn't playing separate messages, separate stories. Closing the laptop, I felt lighter, as if after washing dishes and stacking them clean on the rack. That night, Kayla stitched together a second reel, the behind the table cut, showing only hands, pouring water, placing candles, pulling out extra chairs. The caption read, Kindness is infrastructure. I laughed out loud reading it because it was exactly the language I understood. A sustainable gathering always begins with solid, decent infrastructure. Pinned at the top of my inbox was the fisherman's message from Manteo. If you want fresher crab next time, call me, I'll bring it and sit at the flexible seat. I replied, Next time, I'll call. The flexible seat is always waiting. Before bed, I pulled the blanket up for Grandma Ruth, dimmed the lights, leaving just one string of fairy lights glowing on the porch. I skimmed the last DM of the night. A girl in Raleigh had sent a picture of a table made from stacked textbooks in her dorm, with 4 paper cups and a single cupcake. I set my own table with my roommates tonight. Thank you for giving me the courage. I put the phone down, smiling. Viral, it turns out, isn't about numbers, it's the path of a simple thought carried forward when enough people help bear it. Through the night, Savannah didn't send another word. Her story faded down beneath others. My mother didn't call either, but she tapped a heart on the photo I had pinned. It wasn't reconciliation, it wasn't full understanding. It was a small gesture, enough for me to believe that one day we could sit together and talk without trying to prove who was the good one. I closed my eyes, and in my mind the long table from the night before stretched out again, linen runner, the color of sand, chairs filled, and one seat left intentionally useful. A place to set down an extra bowl of soup, to welcome someone late, or simply to remind me I always have the right to add a chair. And if tomorrow the inbox overflowed again, I already knew my answer would not change. Thank you, I need time. Next time we meet, please listen all the way through. Because after all these years, I've learned one thing. Gratitude doesn't erase boundaries, it helps them stand firm without shouting. A week later, the Outer Banks sky was pale gray, like a linen cloth still damp with morning mist. The wind had eased, the waves moved in rhythm, and the house was hushed in the true sense of immediate family only. I simmered 2 pots of clam chowder from Marcus's handwritten recipe, onions sweated slowly in butter, broth poured in, diced potatoes, clams cooked just enough to stay tender. On the side, a bowl of cucumber dill salad tossed with apple cider vinegar, and in the oven a tray of bread baking crisp outside, soft within. On the long table in the great room, I set out 4 stoneware bowls, 4 glasses of water, a basket of bread, and a small card propped upright. No filming tonight, only us. I didn't want anyone to mistake this place for a set. My parents' SUV rolled slowly onto the gravel drive. Dad got out first, shoulders hunched, tugging at his coat as if the wind were collecting a debt. Mom followed, clutching her shawl tight and avoiding my eyes for just a beat too long. Savannah stepped out last, ponytail high, white shoes fresh as if straight from the box, and most telling of all empty-handed, no camera. That small detail let me exhale. I opened the door. Come in, the wind changes quick out here, I said, stepping back just far enough for them to cross the threshold on their own. The smell of chowder rich with butter and black pepper drifted through the hall. Mom's eyes wandered the room, not searching for the best photo angle, but simply locating her chair. I pointed to the little card that read, "Only us," and said softly, "Tonight is a meal. Nothing more, nothing less." Savannah hesitated, then gave a small nod. We sat down, not with the old ritual of parents at the head, but as 4 people around a long table once meant for many. I ladled chowder into each bowl, bread passed from hand to hand, salad set in the middle. I lifted my spoon and began with the line I'd been steeping all week. "Thank you for coming." No one offered the usual empty reply. Instead, 4 spoons touched bowls nearly in unison, striking a quiet opening note. I continued without circling, without mounting a pulpit, just speaking enough to keep the words from being carried off by the wind. I want to say 3 things. First, why birthdays matter. 30 isn't important because it's a round number, but because I needed a marker to close the years when my chair was so often pushed to the edge. I don't want to keep practicing how to wait after a live stream, after a trip, after whatever's convenient. Second, why this house exists. It isn't a trophy, it isn't a backdrop. It's a safe place I built for myself, like the garage back then, but bigger somewhere. I can set a table, light candles, and know the knife will stay in my hand. Third, why I invited the whole family. Not to replace you, and not to shame anyone. I saw my aunt, my uncle, grandma, the cousins, all pressed to the margins for years. I just pulled them to the center once so the little ones would know, from the start, what a table with no empty seats feels like. Dad set his spoon down, eyes fixed on the bowl as if searching for words carved into the broth. "I didn't see," he said, each syllable pressed out as though forcing himself to be exact. "I thought simple was good for everyone. I measured everything by convenience, and I was blind to the small things, the knife, the candle, the chair. I'm sorry." I nodded, neither rewarding nor punishing. I simply acknowledged a man changing the unit of measure he lived by. Mom smoothed the edge of her shawl, eyes bright though her voice held steady. "I'm sorry. I'm clumsy with praise, too quick to reschedule. I kept thinking you were strong enough not to need it, but it turns out, she didn't finish." She placed her hand on the table, palm open like a half-offered olive branch. I laid my hand there for a second, no longer then drew back to hold my spoon. I didn't want an embrace to stamp reconciliation. I wanted a meal built on new order. Savannah stayed silent through the first pot of chowder. She tore off a piece of bread, gazed out the glass at a gull skimming the edge of the waves, then spoke softly enough for only us to hear. I didn't think it was all that heavy. I waited, offering no rescue. She added, I'm used to seeing everything through a lens measuring by views, by light, by rhythm. I thought joy meant turning the camera on. I didn't realize a camera could also push someone out of frame. I answered, thank you for saying that. Nothing more. Explanations, if they matter, must walk hand in hand with action, not with background music. We moved on to salad, to bread spread with butter. The conversation shifted towards safe ground, the long stretch of US 64, how OBX winds change without warning, whether the dill was a touch too strong. No, but, no. In other families, no, wait until everyone's here. When the bowls were cleared, I poured hot water, set out a plate of simple butter cookies, then leaned on the edge of the table and read out the boundaries as if reciting house rules, but without the chill of law. If you come to any of my tables again here or anywhere, I ask 3 things. 1. No filming. If you want to keep it in memory. 2. Speak in I. No speaking for others, no reducing anyone to a label. 3. If something needs to be postponed, say it early, and don't call it later for simplicity. At a table, later means someone is standing, someone is cold. I looked at each of them. Dad nodded without hesitation. Mom bit her lip, then nodded. Savannah held my gaze, long and unflinching, before she gave the smallest nod of all. Mom reached into her bag, an old habit, and slid an envelope across the table. I brought a printed photo. Of your table. I think prints carry more weight than phones. Inside was the film frame Kayla had taken. Grandma Ruth's hand resting on mine, golden light wrapping around us like honey. I traced the edge of the picture and nodded. I'll keep it. Dad's eyes wandered the room until they landed on the long bench at the end of the table, the flexible seat, empty tonight. He asked a question both literal and not. That seat, what's it for? I smiled. For someone who's late. For an extra bowl of soup. For anyone who wants to sit, stand, and sit again. To remind me that a good table always leaves room. Dad smiled back, the smile of someone finally seeing a simple thing he'd been circling around for years. Before they left, Mom asked if she could walk through the house, not to film but to remember which door led to the kitchen, which one to the deck. Savannah paused at the mocktail bar, touching the chalkboard where OBX Sunset had been erased, and asked how to mix it. I recited the recipe like a memorized lesson, and for the first time, she listened without adding, I'll record it later. Dad stood on the porch, looking down at the sanded boards, murmuring almost to himself. I don't know how I never noticed this smell of wet wood before. I closed the door, letting the sea air rush in, and felt the house in its quiet afternoon doing exactly what it was meant to do, holding steady so people could finally hear themselves. We said goodbye at the threshold, without forcing it into a perfect embrace. Dad shook my hand, firmer than ever. Mom hugged me briefly but sincerely, with no rush in her scent. Savannah brushed my shoulder and nodded. I'll try, not filming during meals. Trying is good, I said. No promises, no hollow vows. The SUV rolled back across the gravel, its tires quieter than when it had arrived. I stood on the deck until the tail lights slipped behind the dunes, then turned inside, cleared the bowls, rinsed the chowder pot, wiped the table dry. In my ears, Grandma Ruth's words from the week before still pulsed steady as a heartbeat. Add another seat. Night fell fast, the fairy lights on the porch glowing into low stars. I sat at the table, opened my laptop, and pieced together one final clip, seconds of hands pulling chairs, spoons tapping bowls, wind flipping the page that read, long table, and a frame I'd taken that afternoon. The card only us propped against the bread basket, 4 empty bowls turned upside down behind it like quiet full stops. I typed the caption, this time in English, because that's how the sentence had lived in my head all week, and because I wanted to send it out on a wave wider than my own shoreline. If you were ever left out, build your own table. There will always be a seat here for those who show up. I hit post, shut the screen, and stepped onto the deck. The air was salt-thick. The Atlantic lay dark and flat, like a table freshly wiped clean. I pulled the flexible bench at the end of my table out, just a new habit to remind myself that whether anyone came or not, the place remained, waiting for whoever was ready to sit and listen. And in that moment between sea and house, I understood I didn't need a conclusion tied with ribbon. I needed boundaries respected and a door always open. The table was set, the candles burned, the seats were full. The rest was simple. If someone chose to show up, I would choose to welcome them.